Hello, everyone. Good to see you, friends, and welcome back to Artist Questions. This is the mostly weekly live stream where we look at some of the biggest questions facing contemporary artists in the modern art world today. My name's Dan Curtis. I am an artist and arts educator from London in the UK, where you join me on another hot day, which is amazing. Very surprising for London, but yeah, and I hate it, to be honest, and I look forward until the dreary misery of clouds comes back upon us. No, it's not that bad. But in classic fashion, as a British person, it is boiling hot outside, and I'm drinking a hot cup of tea. Essential, and I'm sure there's many people who will describe to you how tea actually cools you down when you are in a hot place. Some people really do think that and believe that kind of thing. Some people say it's like the sweat; it sweats out and then the water cools the sweat. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on from sweat chat and to today's topic, which is brought to you by myself and Exchange Art and Bonk Art Masters, who are the amazing supporters of what we're doing here at The Healthy Artist and through this series of artist questions. Today's big question is, how do we balance art and admin? This is a good one, I think, because already I can feel through the screen stress coming from people. I can feel tension. And actually, with that in mind, this week I want to do something maybe a bit different to what you might expect with this, in that, in the artist toolkit course a couple of weeks ago, which you can now find here on the YouTube channel if you go to the live section, soon to be added to the main video section. But if you go to the live, you can see the recordings of both parts of that. We did a big section there on, all the administration that you need to really get yourself a footing in the art world, thinking about consignment agreements, thinking about artist statements, art CVs, all these kind of things, websites, and how to organize that. So if you want that content, I really recommend going back and watching particularly part 1 of that, and then part 2 for how to apply it. So I'm not going to cover that ground today, as in here's 10 steps to make it so much easier for you to do admin, etc. What I want to get to instead is this term in the question, balance. How do we balance art and admin? And I want to look at that because I think that's a key struggle that artists have when it comes to administration and professional practice, is that they kind of a distorted lens on what admin actually is. And therefore it becomes difficult to balance with your art and feels like something totally other to your art. So I want to start with a few questions then. Just have a moment to think about some of these questions just as I put them out. And I'm going to say I, and when I say I mean you asking this question to yourself. Okay. The first question is, what do I think admin is? When you say administration, admin, what's the picture that's in your head? Yeah. The next question is, do I see admin as the opposite to, or as something outside of my art practice? Something different. The next question, a really important one, what happens in my body? Like literally, what sensations am I feeling in my body, my nervous system, when I think about admin and when I think about doing the work of administration as an artist? And in all that package, what's the story that I have in my head about what admin is as an artist? Okay, if we were doing this sort of face to face, I'd get everyone to write it down. But if you're watching a recording of this, then maybe take a little pause just to actually write that down or think about those questions And because getting the answer to those questions is a really good starting point for thinking about how you might need to reframe the way you approach administration as an artist. Because for many of us in our bodies, when we think about admin, there's tension, stress, fullness. Our nervous system becomes reactive, especially if we've, as many artists, maybe not come from a background or a place where there is great understanding or use of finance or planning, things like that. Because we have brains that, maybe even are neurodiverse and work completely differently, that we can find it so stressful to begin to think about admin. But the question is, what's the story of admin that we have? Is it a story that's actually completely different to what's happening, and how can we reframe it? So here's a kind of wonky view that many of us might have of administration or admin as artists that we can begin to reframe. Maybe as when you think of what admin is and that picture in your head, for you, it's capitalism. Admin for you links to this idea of everything must be a transaction, a sale, everything must be leading to some improvement or growth in my business, right? And for many artists, that can feel completely anathema to what they are trying to create, and so opposed to the nature of what they do as an artist. So maybe that's one story you've got. Maybe when you think about admin, all you see is like numbers, spreadsheets, lines, charts, forms, and they all blur together into like a gray, like cloudy mass that makes absolutely no sense. And you feel, kind of suffocated by the whole thing. Maybe that's your view of admin. Maybe a view of admin that you've got is one of optimization. It comes back to sort of like a modern self-help culture, which is seeing you as a human as just a technical problem to be overcome. And that if you've got the correct morning routine, or you can use the Pomodoro technique, or if you break your day into the correct amount of steps, then you will optimize your admin and all of your workflow will be easier, etc. Right? This kind of language can feel really odd and really unnerving to artists, and can again send our body and our nervous system into spirals, thinking like, this is not how I work. Another story you might have about administration is that it's a mark of your own failure, your inability to complete it, or the opportunities that you've missed, or the poor way in which you have charged for things, or maybe the things that you never followed up, are showing that you've got something wrong, and that a real artists wouldn't do this. Really, people who are really committed and really serious wouldn't do this. In fact, a real artist wouldn't even have admin. They would have a person to do it, a PA. Maybe that's the marker that admin has for you. Maybe admin has become a sort of, therefore, a mirror for like your shame or like your self-worth. Sort of procrastination around admin, not doing it, not completing it, often then leads to these ties to feelings of inadequacy. Invoicing can feel like asking for validation. Oh, please pay me. Oh, it would be so nice if you could give me some money. Applying for a grant feels like gambling, your self-worth. And if you don't get it, it just shows that your practice is not worth it. And these things can really be connected with trauma and his past history, plus things like executive dysfunction, with ADHD, OCD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, all of these things, and things that a lot of artists do find themselves, coming from backgrounds of this. And therefore, those feelings of inadequacy that admin brings up when it's packaged in this capitalized, optimized way of thinking can make us feel so stressed out. And the main thing we end up doing instead then is just ducking out of the whole thing and giving up, or sort of undervaluing our work by like not charging for it properly or high enough, not feeling like we're enough to even be paid for what we're doing. And we again fall into another trap, another story that art is just passion work and it doesn't matter if you get paid or not, well, then you're ending up not being able to eat or pay your rent, right? Another story about admin might be you see it primarily when you have that picture in your head of admin. I know when I think about it, it is me on my own. It's me on my own at a computer or with printouts in a sort of office or like a weird room or something, and it feels so trapped and it's lonely. Yeah. And it's not a task in which I can ask for support. It's a task that I'm just supposed to be able to do, right? Another view, we're really knocking them out here. Another view is that, yeah, there's no community around any of this. There's no way to access help anywhere. And that we're just stuck with our inability. So all these stories about money, admin, filing, sorting our professional practice out, that turn into very opposing ideas against our practice. What we need to understand is like it makes sense that many of us will find ourselves in this place and that many of us will feel so stressed about these things because yes, they can feel very different to the intuitive or sort of creative way that we work in other areas of our life. And that's just what we feel we want to be doing. But I think a lot of that is because we've got a false sort of narrative about what admin is. And administration is connected to finance and charts and professionalism. And that is something that we don't have or something that's exclusive to that culture or that people group or that type of economy. Yeah. But that in itself is a lie. It's something that we are allowed to break down. And I think that many of us feel stressed about administration and say doing taxes or something because we feel we're just going to constantly make a mistake, that we are behind in some secret knowledge or something like that, and that we can never get there. But all of that isn't true. But a lot of that is controlling the way that we then approach our administration tasks. So a kind of, before we get on to some reframing and thinking about other ways of thinking about administration and about professional practice, the beginning of that really is learning to reflect on those initial questions of what's the story for you around administration? What's the feeling in your body? What's the picture in your mind? And if it's all negative and lonely and trapped and full of failure and shame, then that's something you need to really listen to and think, okay, at what time in my story did that start to come along? And how can I begin, on the one hand, to unpack that story and say, actually, that's not true. And who told me that story in the first place? Many of us as artists have grown up hearing, oh, well, you're never going to make money from that. What's going to be your actual job, though? And being belittled right from the beginning, right from the start. And I can attest to that myself in so many ways. And that comes from people's projection of themselves onto you. That becomes from people's insecurity when they meet an artist and they see someone who's in a way kind of representing a freedom that they don't have, and turns into this, oh yeah, but it can't be real, it can't be proper, it can't be capitalism, it can't be monetized, and etc. So that can be, unpackaging that story is really important on the other hand. And then connected to that as the second step, I think, to beginning to reframe, is learning to accept and respect yourself and understand your limits, particularly if you have got something like ADHD or OCD like I have, or even depression, anxiety, which I also have in this lovely concoction of mind, or you're dealing with autism or any other thing, that is making it that, or you're dealing with this story, this fake story that you've got. you really need to understand that part about yourself and accept that part of yourself. And by doing that, allowing yourself then to approach administration tasks in the way that is right for you, in the way that acknowledges, accepts, and respects your own limitations, your own boundaries, and not just what you can't do, but also what you can do, who you are, and making administration something and professionalism something that feels creative, not something that feels like you now have to step into another body that absolutely fills you with rage or fear or sadness or, anxiety. In a way, admin is a part of the process of being kind to yourself, and I think that it really comes out of acknowledging. I know this is a bit of a corny phrase, but like acknowledging your why. And when you come back to the why of why you're an artist, that those core reasons, whether it's just the compulsion that you have to do it, whether it's those first things you saw when you were a kid, whether it was that mentor that guided you, whatever it was, when you just really knew this was what you wanted to do, it's adding admin into that part of your story. That is part of the why. Yeah. And when you come to your why, you'll realize that admin tasks are part of your why. They're part of your reason. They're not extra or separate or in the way of the why. They're part of what makes the why work. Yeah. So let's push into that a little bit more. So, is there a way then, if that's the case, you're thinking about your why and your core values and motivations, is there a way that you can reframe administration and all the tasks that you need to do as a form of care and as a form of your collaborative, creative story? We're thinking here about your future self, your collaborators, your audience, all the important things that are around what it means to be an artist as you move from being a child at home and making stuff to show no one, and then you do make stuff to show people, or you make stuff to involve people, or you make stuff to challenge people. And can we reframe administration as part of that, as a form of care? Therefore, you could look at, sending an invoice, right? Absolute hell on earth horror for so many artists because it triggers feelings of inadequacy, like I can't do it right, fear, like I'm going to get this wrong and I'm going to go to prison because I don't get my taxes right, whatever. Another thing, like, you get sort of homelessness anxiety. I think a lot of people feel like that, like they just make this one mistake and they're going to be out on the street next week or whatever. And then therefore a feeling of inadequacy in asking for money, like again the value of your work is not enough in this system, and you have low self-esteem when you comes to these kind of tasks. So then you're like, can I even ask for this much? It doesn't make sense. Whereas people in other in other workplaces are asking so much more for so much less in so many ways and not losing any sleep on it, right? So can you see, if you reframe it as care, so instead of coming to your invoice with all that baggage and fear, can you reframe sending an invoice as caring for your livelihood? That is what sending an invoice is. Or can you reframe organizing files are caring for your ideas? These are precious things. Can you see how reframing it into this language that makes more sense to artists helps? Retouching the photographs of your work that might be like boring or stressful moments are care for how your work is seen by the audience, and you're serving the audience then too. Filing, again, is caring about your process, caring about your story, caring about what you communicate to the rest of the world. If you can begin to reframe admin as a form of care, self-care, future self-care, care for your collaborators and care for your audience, it can give you a much better place to work from than the usual stories that we are trapped inside when we think about admin. A couple of thoughts then in closing these ideas. If you've got any questions, by the way, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm just going to open Twitter here as well, making sure I'm not missing anything from anyone, which I sometimes do. So apologies for that. Okay. Thoughts to close this section. I think a lot of the best, most productive artists, and this is not in the optimization language, but in like the making things happen language, comes out of habits, healthy habits. In the end, if you think about it like this, there's a great analogy I heard from James Clear, which is that we sometimes think we just need to, we just need a full day and we could get everything sorted or something like that, which is true. Sometimes you do need an adulting day. And I did talk about that in the artist toolkit, where, you can take an adulting weekend and do your taxes and fix things in your house and stuff like that. And that can be really fun to do that all in one go. It gets you motivated. But we can't always leave everything to these big blowout last minute moments, right? Especially when it comes to the work of administration, because it's the continuing journey of our work. It's not just these one-off times, right? And the habits then from James Clear is talking about, he uses the example of someone who goes to the gym once in a month and does a 3-hour session, like feels like pumped when they come out, like, yeah, I did so good, I did so much, I was so productive, I had, judging it by like the amount that's done in this time frame. And then against someone who does a 10-minute 15-minute workout at home every day, in between other things, which of those two people is going to see the most results in the end? The person who comes and does this big, like, performative 3-hour explosion, or the person that builds a simple habit of 10 minutes a day before breakfast, or 10 minutes a day after lunch, or something like that? It's the 10 minutes a day, because showing up for yourself continually, as best you can, as often you can, leads to really great results. Not only because each time are you building up the skills and building up the tolerance and the ability to do it, but also because it's adding to your sense of professionalism in yourself, and it's giving you a groundwork to see your successes as part of a step-by-step process. Admin in the end is how your art travels to the rest of the world. So if you can keep coming to your administration with this reframed way of thinking about it as self-care and showing up for yourself, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, it's going to turn so much around for you as an artist, because it will become a foundation for your work and for your work success, rather than a stressful thing that you rush to do in the last minute and then maybe miss opportunities because you didn't take the time that it deserved. In the end, I think we've got to be careful of another kind of story, which is again around the story of what real artists are supposed to be like. And I think it kind of comes with two halves. There's either seeing ourselves as above admin, a real artist, a real genius, would have someone else doing that bit so they can focus on the pure creativity, is what they were born to do in this life and what they deserve to do. And we must sort of follow the great leader of this genius artist. Again, it's seeing administration as something so other, and like only painting or only rehearsing or only whatever else, as that is the only thing of life that matters as an artist, which isn't the case. Or we see ourselves as below admin. Oh, we can't invoice, we can't ask, we haven't got enough self-esteem to even send an email to someone. And I think a really good way, as well as all these reframing about that, is to break through this idea that you are alone in doing this. If you don't understand something, if you feel inadequate, if you don't know what you're doing when it comes to taxes or finance or filing or anything on those lines, reach out to someone. There are so many great websites that help artists with legalities and give them, guides to make the best of what they're doing. An artist is who is a bit further ahead of you. Ask them what they do. And if they don't have a fucking clue, ask the next person along, or how they get help. If you're working with a gallery, ask them about, how it is they manage things and how do they balance stuff. And what that does is takes you out of this place of shame and isolation, which is what shame drives us to more and more, to being on our own and suffering on our own, which also ironically is what optimization culture does. It says it's just about you figuring out your shit, and if you did it right, then you would be successful, like me who's selling you this course, right? It's all nonsense. Whereas community bridges that gap. It relieves us of shame. And when we start to share our issues with administration, with finance, with emailing, with invoicing, and all these things, then we feel so much more empowered. And it's a big part of why I'm doing this Artist Questions each week, because I want people to feel capable, enabled. I want you to feel like you can get out there and do it, And we really want to be proactive, not reactive. Even with all the best will in the world, right? With everything laid out, with practicing, picking up, habits daily, we're doing as best we can. We're reframing administration. We're thinking about it as self-care. We're getting support from other people. It's still easy as artists to be triggered by things like a sudden contract change or a curator saying something bit different than you expected, or suddenly realizing that you had a bill that you missed. These things happen, right? And it can just whoosh, it all comes back. I'm inadequate, I can't do any of this, whatever. That's a reactive mindset where we're just in the situation, like panicking, and it's either goes to isolation or like, I've got to do so much stuff, I've got to fix everything. And the slowness is all gone and the process is all gone. And again, if you applied that to your art practice, if you were like, everything must be fixed right now, it wouldn't make any sense, right? We need that same slow process when it comes to administration as well. So be proactive. This is something I learned from my therapist a long time ago, which was when I have those kind of reactionary triggers where it leads to panic and low self-esteem, just to slow down again, take a breath and say, how can I be proactive in this situation? Maybe not right away, but when you've had a moment to calm down, think, okay, let's look at the options. Remove yourself from it emotionally and just look at things in that kind, self-caring way, knowing that it's going to help your future self. And then next to that is to also be adaptive, being the kind of people who can, when strange things happen, through our knowledge and our slow process and our building up of habits, we're much more able to adapt to challenges that come up in administration in various art scenarios. When we have got a sudden strange request from a gallery or something that seems not quite right or out of the contract, something when we suddenly have to invoice for more than we realized, when we have to discuss those kind of things with a client or a friend or a gallery or whatever else, we can begin to adapt ourselves because we've got more strength, because we've built up the habits. Again, it's like the person going to the gym. When they're doing that 10 minutes every day, the strength they have at the end of the month is so much higher than someone who tries to like blast it all in a panic mode in 3 hours and thinks, that's it, my life's changed. From now on, everything's changing, because it doesn't work like that. Okay, friends, that's me on art and admin, taking a little bit of a different angle on it. And like I say, if you want to look at some of the key administrative tasks and the things that I think are most important, then please go and check out the Artist Toolkit. If you're on the YouTube channel, it's on the live drop-down button on the channel, and you can see parts 1 and 2 there, but it will be up on the main channel, on the main sort of videos page as well soon. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a joy, and I hope that something of that can motivate you and get you excited and keep you moving forward, remembering that the process of administration is part of the process of art as well. They are not a dichotomy. They are not opposed to one another. It's all part of the same language, of the same circle. And therefore, we need to accept ourselves, our limitations and our skills, and work out what's a way that I can reframe this story and actually begin to do administration in a way that works for me. Okay, friends, love you lots, and I will see you next week for the next episode. Thanks for joining me, and bye for now.